The entire executive floor of Hartwell Industries collapsed into chaos when the central storage system crashed completely, just hours before a multi-billion-dollar signing. Dozens of engineers stood frozen before flashing red monitors, helpless. Evelyn Hartwell, the iron-willed billionaire who had not lost composure in years, felt the ground shift beneath her polished heels. Then the door opened. A quiet single father, still holding his janitor's cart, stepped into the server room. He studied the failing system for a few seconds, then said, "I can make it work again." Nobody believed him, until every screen lit back up. The 42nd floor of Hartwell Industries always smelled faintly of cold coffee and machine oil after midnight. Evelyn Hartwell preferred it that way. She walked through the empty corridor at 10:15, her heels striking the polished concrete in a steady rhythm she had practiced for 20 years. Tomorrow morning at 9 sharp, she would sit across from the largest defense tech consortium in the country and sign a contract worth $2.4 billion. Everything about that signing had been rehearsed, measured, and locked down. Nothing in her schedule allowed for surprise. She passed the glass wall of the main server bay without looking inside. The blue glow of the cooling lights had been the backdrop of her career for more than a decade. Hartwell Industries had built its reputation on one promise: a self-protecting storage architecture that no competitor could match. The system was called Sentinel. It was her design, her name on every patent, and the centerpiece of tomorrow's deal. Sentinel had never failed, not once in 7 years. 2 floors below, in a narrow utility corridor that smelled of bleach and dust, Liam Carter pushed his cleaning cart past the emergency stairwell. He moved the way men move when they have learned to make themselves small. Shoulders forward, eyes down, hands steady on the handle. The graveyard shift suited him. Fewer people to greet fewer questions about why a man in his late 30s was wiping fingerprints off elevator buttons at midnight. He did not mind the work. He minded only the hour at the end of the shift when he drove home to a quiet house and tried not to think about how he had ended up there. He had been someone else once, a senior systems engineer at a firm that no longer existed, with a wife who used to wait up for him with a thermos of tea. When she got sick, he stopped working to take care of her. When she died, he found that the industry had moved on without him, and that nobody wanted a 40-year-old engineer with a 4-year gap and a haunted look in his eyes. The cleaning company had asked no questions. He had taken the job and never spoken of the other one again. At 10:43 that night, the first alarm sounded on the 42nd floor. Evelyn was reviewing the final clause of the contract when her phone buzzed twice in quick succession. She finished the paragraph, set down her pen, and only then looked at the screen. The message from the night supervisor was 3 words long. "Sentinel is down." She read it twice before she stood. By the time she reached the server bay, the room was already full. Marcus Reed, her head of systems engineering, stood at the central console, with his sleeves pushed up and his jaw clenched. 6 junior engineers surrounded him, each one bent over a keyboard. The wall of monitors that normally displayed pale blue diagnostics was now a flickering grid of red. Lines of error code scrolled past, too fast to read. Marcus did not look up when she entered. He only said, "We are working on it." Evelyn moved to the glass partition and looked at the screens for a long moment. "Tell me what I'm looking at." Marcus turned. His face was already damp at the temples. Sentinel triggered a full lockdown 40 minutes ago. Something inside the system flagged a corruption event, and the protective subroutines isolated every storage node before we could intervene. The diagnostic tools we built to handle this are also locked out. We cannot get a clean read on the core. "How long until you can—" "I do not know yet." She did not raise her voice. She rarely did. "The signing is in 10 hours and 17 minutes. The consortium expects a live demonstration of the system before the contract is countersigned. If Sentinel does not respond by sunrise, we have nothing to show them." Marcus held her gaze. "We will fix it." She did not answer. She walked back to her office, closed the door, and stood at the window for a long time, looking down at the city. She had been told once, by a man she had since outgrown, that the difference between a good executive and a great one was the willingness to be wrong in front of strangers. She had never believed that. She believed in being right, in being prepared, in trusting only the systems she had built with her own hands. Tonight, the system she trusted most had stopped speaking to her. Down on the 38th floor, Liam emptied a waste basket into the rolling bin attached to his cart. The corridor outside the smaller server room was usually quiet at this hour. Tonight it was not. 2 engineers he did not recognize hurried past him without a glance, talking in low, urgent voices. One of them said the word, "Cascade." The other said, "We are losing the indexes." Liam slowed his cart, but did not stop. He had not stepped inside a server room in almost 5 years. He had told himself the door was closed for good. But the sound coming through the wall as he passed was a sound he remembered, a low, uneven hum that did not belong in a healthy machine. He stood in the corridor with his hand resting on the cart handle and listened for nearly a minute before he moved on. By 11:30, the situation upstairs had not improved. Marcus had rerouted 3 teams onto the problem. The error logs were now writing faster than the diagnostic software could parse them. Daniel Whitaker, chairman of the board, had been pulled out of a dinner and was on a video call from the back seat of his car, his face filling one of the side monitors. He was not shouting. Daniel Whitaker never shouted. He was simply asking the same question every 4 minutes in the same flat tone. "What is your plan, Evelyn?" She did not have one to give him. At 12:04, Liam came up to the 42nd floor with a service ticket to replace the bulbs in the executive corridor. He was not supposed to be near the main server bay. He took the long way around out of habit, and that was how he ended up standing in front of the glass partition, looking in at a room full of men who had run out of ideas. He watched for almost 3 minutes. Long enough to see Marcus try the same restart sequence twice. Long enough to see the timestamp on the corruption alert. Long enough to notice that the cooling fans on the secondary rack were running at a different pitch than the primary, which meant the power draw was not balanced, which meant whatever had triggered the lockdown was not where Marcus was looking. He knew that the moment he opened his mouth, he would be asked to leave. He almost walked away. He thought about the modest paycheck that kept his life intact, and the small life he had built in silence over the last 5 years. Then he thought about the look on Evelyn Hartwell's face as she stood at the back of the room, and he set down his toolbox and pushed the door open. The room went quiet for 1 full second before Marcus turned. "You cannot be in here." "I think I know what is wrong with your system," Liam said. He did not raise his voice. He kept his hands loose at his sides. "I can make it work again." Marcus laughed, once short and sharp. "Get him out!" 2 of the junior engineers moved toward Liam. Evelyn lifted one hand, and they stopped. She looked at the janitor in the gray uniform with the cleaning company patch on the chest. She looked at the wall of red monitors. She looked at the clock above the door, which now read 12:11. She had 8 hours and 49 minutes until the consortium walked into her lobby. "What is your name?" she said. "Liam Carter. And what do you do here, Mr. Carter, when you are not interrupting my engineers?" "I clean the floors." Marcus made a sound that was not quite a word. Evelyn did not look at him. She kept her eyes on Liam. There was something in the way the man held himself, something that did not match the uniform. She had built a career on reading people in the first 10 seconds of meeting them, and her instinct, which had never failed her in 20 years of negotiations, was telling her something she did not want to hear. She turned her head slightly toward Marcus, without breaking eye contact with Liam. "Give him one chance. If he makes it worse, escort him out of the building. If he does not stay out of his way." Marcus opened his mouth. He closed it again. Liam picked up his toolbox and stepped into the server bay. Liam set his toolbox down at the foot of the primary rack and did not touch a keyboard. The engineers around him kept working, kept typing, kept watching the red monitors, as if staring at them long enough might force them to change. He did none of those things. He stood at the center of the room with his head slightly tilted and listened. Marcus watched him from the console with his arms folded. After almost a minute, he said, "Are you planning to do something? Or are we paying you to stand there?" "I am listening to the room," Liam said. "To the room. The cooling fans on the secondary rack are running about 18% faster than the primary. They should be matched. Whatever is pulling that extra current is not on your diagnostic display, because your diagnostic tools are reading from the same locked partition that crashed in the first place." One of the junior engineers, a woman with red-rimmed eyes, glanced at the cooling readouts on her terminal, and her expression shifted. She did not say anything. She looked back at Marcus and waited. Evelyn stood near the doorway with her arms crossed tightly across her chest. She watched Liam walk slowly along the line of server racks, brushing the back of his hand lightly against the metal cabinets, the way a doctor might check a patient for fever. He stopped at the third cabinet from the end and rested his palm flat against the side. Then he crouched, opened the lower service panel, and shone a small flashlight inside. "I am going to need access to the maintenance terminal," he said without turning around. "Not the main console. The hardwired one against the back wall, the one nobody uses anymore." Marcus laughed under his breath. "That terminal has not been touched in 3 years. That is why it is the only one I trust right now." Evelyn turned her head slightly. "Marcus." He held her eyes for a second longer than was comfortable. Then he stepped aside. Liam crossed the room, sat down at the dusty terminal in the corner, and began typing. His hands moved differently from the engineers around him. Slower, more deliberate, like a man who had not done this in a long time and was waiting for his fingers to remember. The screen in front of him filled with green text on a black background. He pulled up a low-level system log that predated Sentinel's modern dashboard. The entries were small, dense, and stretched back to the moment the lockdown began. He read in silence for almost 2 minutes. Then he leaned back. "Your system did not crash," he said. Sentinel locked itself down on purpose. Something tripped the corruption detector at 10:03 this evening, and the protective subroutines did exactly what they were designed to do. They quarantined every node before the corruption could spread. The problem is that the trigger was a false positive, and now Sentinel will not unlock itself until the original signal clears, which it cannot do, because Sentinel is the thing holding the signal. Marcus shook his head. "We already considered that. It is not a false positive. The corruption flags are real." "The flags are real," Liam said. "The corruption is not. Something outside the software made Sentinel think there was a problem. That is why your engineers cannot find it inside the code. It is not in the code." Evelyn stepped closer. "Where is it?" "That is what I am trying to find out." He stood up and walked back to the third cabinet. He opened the panel again, pulled a small multimeter from his toolbox, and held the probes against 2 contacts on the backup power coupling. He watched the reading for a long moment, then moved the probes to a different pair of contacts and watched again. When he stood up, his face had changed. The careful listening expression was gone. In its place was something quieter and harder. "How old is this building's secondary power line?" Daniel Whitaker leaned forward into the camera from the side monitor. "What does the power line have to do with anything?" Liam did not look at the screen. He looked at Evelyn. "Your backup power coupling is failing. Not dead. Failing. It is delivering current in small, irregular pulses instead of a clean line. Sentinel reads those pulses as corruption in the data stream because, from its point of view, that is exactly what they look like. Every time the coupling stutters, the system thinks one of its own nodes is being tampered with. Tonight, it stuttered hard enough to trigger a full lockdown." The room was silent. Marcus's arms were no longer crossed. One of the junior engineers had turned toward Liam without realizing she had done it. Evelyn spoke carefully. "Can you fix it?" "I can stabilize the coupling. I cannot replace it tonight. But if I can get a clean signal into Sentinel for 30 seconds, The protective subroutine should clear the alert on its own. Then do it. He turned back to the cabinet. Marcus took a step closer, watching Liam's hands. Liam reached inside the cabinet with a screwdriver, made one small adjustment to a connector that was almost invisible against the rear panel, and the entire rack went dark. For 2 full seconds, the room held its breath. Every monitor in the bay blinked black. The cooling fans on the secondary rack wound down with a low, descending tone. Marcus took half a step forward, his mouth opening. Daniel's voice came through the speaker, sharp and flat. "What just happened? Evelyn, what just happened?" Evelyn did not answer. She was looking at Liam, and Liam was watching the small indicator light at the top of the cabinet, the one Marcus had not even noticed was there. It was off. Then, after what felt like a much longer time than it was, it blinked once. Then, twice. Then it held steady. Amber. "Wait for it," Liam said. The primary rack came back online first, then the secondary. The wall of monitors flickered, went black again, and then began to populate panel by panel with the pale blue diagnostics Evelyn had not seen in almost 2 hours. The error grid was gone. In its place, a single line of text. Sentinel rebooting from clean state. Estimated recovery 14 minutes. Marcus stared at the screen. He did not speak. One of the junior engineers let out a breath that turned into something close to a laugh and then stopped herself. Evelyn walked slowly to the wall of monitors. She read the line of text twice. Then she turned and looked at Liam, who was already kneeling again at the cabinet, tightening the connector he had loosened. "Mr. Carter," she said, "who taught you to do that?" He did not turn around. "I taught myself, a long time ago. You are not just a janitor. Tonight, I am whatever you need me to be." She did not push. She walked back to the doorway and stood there, her arms no longer crossed. Sentinel was rebooting. The data was still inside. The signing was still possible. Then, at 12:47, the monitors flickered again. It was small at first. A single line of code scrolled past on the leftmost screen, and then another, and then a third. Marcus moved back to the console immediately. The junior engineers followed. Liam stood up from the cabinet and turned slowly toward the wall. "What is that?" Evelyn said. Marcus was already typing. "It is the reboot. It is the system coming back up." "That is not the reboot," Liam said. Marcus did not look up. "I have been watching this system for 7 years. I know what a reboot looks like." "That is not the reboot." The line of text at the bottom of the wall changed. The blue diagnostic gave way to a single yellow notice, and then a second, and then a column of them began stacking down the screen. Anomalous node detected. Quarantine initiated. Anomalous node detected. Quarantine initiated. Liam crossed the room in 3 steps. He leaned over Marcus's shoulder and read the column twice. His face went very still. "Sentinel is doing it again," he said. "It is reading its own reboot data as corruption. The protective subroutine is starting a new lockdown." Marcus turned in his chair. "Then your fix did not work." "My fix worked. The coupling is stable. The problem is that Sentinel has now seen 2 corruption events inside 3 hours, and the self-protection layer is escalating. It is not just isolating nodes anymore. It is preparing to delete the files it thinks are infected before they can spread." The room went cold. Evelyn took a single step forward. "How long do we have?" Liam read the timestamp at the bottom of the screen. "Maybe 40 minutes, maybe less. Once the deletion protocol begins, it cannot be reversed from inside the system. Sentinel will erase every file it has flagged, and by sunrise, there will be nothing left to demonstrate." Daniel's voice came through the speaker, no longer flat. "Evelyn, listen to me very carefully. End this. End this right now. Call the consortium and postpone the signing. Tell them we had a security incident. We can recover from a delay. We cannot recover from a public failure on the floor tomorrow morning. Evelyn did not answer him. She looked at Liam. What do you need? I need you to let me shut down Sentinel completely. Marcus stood up so fast, his chair rolled back into the cabinet behind him. Absolutely not. You do not shut down a live storage system in the middle of a quarantine event. You will lose everything that is still in the write buffer. That is 0.5 terabyte of active data. If we do nothing, you lose all of it. You do not know that. I do know that. Marcus turned to Evelyn. Do not let him do this. He has been in this room for less than an hour. I have spent 7 years inside Sentinel. I am telling you, as the head of your engineering team, that shutting down the system right now is the worst possible move. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. She looked at the wall of yellow notices which were now stacking faster than she could count. She looked at Daniel's face on the side monitor, his jaw tight, his eyes warning her the way they had warned her many times before, the way a man warns a colleague he is about to vote against. She looked at Liam. He was not asking her to believe him. He was simply standing there, waiting. Do it, she said. Marcus turned away from her. He walked to the far side of the room and stood with his back to the console, his hands on his hips, his shoulders rigid. The 2 junior engineers looked between him and Evelyn and did not move. Liam went back to the maintenance terminal. He typed for almost a minute. The wall of monitors flickered, then went dark, panel by panel, in a slow descending wave. The cooling fans wound down. The hum that had filled the room since Evelyn first walked in fell away into something close to silence. For the first time in 7 years, Hartwell Industries had no live storage system. On the video call, Daniel's face had gone pale. Evelyn, the board is going to have an emergency session at 6 in the morning. I want you to understand what that means. I understand what it means, she said. I have supported you for a long time. I am not sure I can support you through this. I understand. He ended the call. The side monitor went black. The room was very quiet. The 2 junior engineers had moved to the wall and were standing close together, not speaking. Evelyn stood near the doorway with her hands at her sides, and for a long moment, she did not feel like a CEO at all. She felt like a woman who had just gambled everything she had built on a stranger in a gray uniform. Liam was still at the terminal. The green text on the black screen scrolled past in steady columns, and his face in the glow of the monitor looked older than it had an hour ago. He was somewhere else now. He was inside the machine, in a way none of her engineers had ever been, and whatever he was doing it alone. She walked across the room and stopped a few feet behind him. She watched the back of his head, the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his right hand kept returning to the same keystroke pattern. After almost 2 minutes, she spoke quietly. Mr. Carter, whatever happens in the next 30 minutes, I want you to know that I made this decision. Not you. If this fails, it does not fall on you. He kept typing. When he answered her, his voice was lower than before, and there was something underneath it she had not heard in him until now. With respect, Miss Hartwell, if this fails, it falls on both of us. I have been waiting a long time for a room like this. I am not going to stand in it and let it fall apart. She did not answer. She stepped back to the doorway and watched the dark monitors and the clock above the door, which now read 1:19 in the morning. And she waited. The server room at 1:20 in the morning felt less like a workspace and more like the inside of a stopped clock. The cooling fans were silent. The monitors were dark. The only sound was the soft tap of Liam Carter's fingers against the maintenance terminal and the occasional shift of weight from one of the 2 junior engineers who had stayed behind. Marcus had not turned around. He stood with his back to the console, his hands still on his hips, his shoulders carrying the rigid posture of a man who was no longer in charge of his own room. Evelyn had not asked him to leave. Whatever authority he had walked in with 2 hours ago was no longer his. She stayed near the doorway for almost 10 minutes before she moved. Then she crossed the room and sat down in the chair beside Liam's terminal. She had not sat down in a server room in 12 years. She did not say anything. She simply placed herself there in the chair next to him and let him work. Liam noticed without looking. His hands kept moving, but something in his shoulders eased slightly. After another long stretch of typing, he spoke without turning his head. I worked at a company called Marlin Systems before this, 6 years as a senior engineer. We built the kind of storage architecture Sentinel was modeled after. I was not the lead designer. I was the one they sent in when the lead designer's work stopped behaving. Evelyn did not turn her head either. What happened to Marlin Systems? It was acquired. The team I worked with was let go. I had already taken a leave of absence by then. My wife was sick. By the time she passed the industry, I knew it moved on, and the version of me that used to walk into rooms like this had been gone for almost 2 years. I tried to come back. Nobody wanted a man with a 4-year gap and a face like mine. So you took the cleaning job. I took the cleaning job because it paid on time, and because nobody at the cleaning company asked me questions I did not have answers for. I have not touched a system like Sentinel in almost 5 years. I told myself I never would again. Evelyn looked at him then. The sight of his face in the green glow of the terminal was tired, in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. Why tonight? Because I heard it through the wall on the 38th floor, and I knew what it was. And because the man who used to be able to fix that sound is still in here somewhere. I think tonight is the first time in 5 years he has been allowed to step forward. She watched the screen scroll past in steady green columns and did not interrupt him again. At 1:34, the first indicator light on the primary rack blinked from red to amber. Liam saw it before any of them. He stopped typing for half a breath, then started again faster now. The cooling fans on the secondary rack came on in a low, even hum. One by one, the monitors on the far wall began to wake up. The diagnostics that filled them were not yet blue. They were a pale, uncertain gray, the color of a system that did not yet know what it was. Marcus turned around for the first time in almost half an hour. He did not move closer. He simply watched. Liam typed for another 4 minutes without speaking. The screens shifted gradually gray to a darker gray, then to the first hints of blue. The yellow notices did not return. In their place, a single line of text appeared at the bottom of the central monitor. Sentinel reinitializing. Clean state confirmed. Estimated full recovery 6 minutes. The junior engineer with the red-rimmed eyes brought a hand up to her mouth. The other did not move. Marcus took a single step forward and then stopped himself. At 1:41, the wall came back fully blue. The grid of diagnostic panels populated with the steady, ordered streams of data Evelyn had been looking at every morning for 7 years. Sentinel was awake. The files were intact. The system that had nearly erased itself an hour earlier was now reporting that every node had been recovered and verified. Liam took his hands off the keyboard. He did not lean back. He sat very still the way a man sits when he has not yet allowed himself to believe what he has just done. Evelyn stood up. She walked to the wall of monitors and read the diagnostic line 3 times before she turned around. "Mr. Carter, how long until the demonstration team can confirm everything for the 9 o'clock signing?" "They will need about an hour to walk through the verification. You have more than enough time." "Thank you." She did not say it loudly. She said it the way she said everything, with the same measured weight. But she said it directly to him, in front of every person in the room, and she did not look away when she said it. She turned to Marcus. The skin under his eyes was darker than it had been when the night began. He held her gaze for several seconds before he spoke. "Miss Hartwell, I owe Mr. Carter an apology." "You do." He turned toward Liam. He did not soften his posture, but he did not hide behind it either. "I was wrong. About you, and about the system. I am sorry." Liam looked up from the terminal. "I have been wrong about a lot of things too. We can talk about it later." Marcus nodded once. He walked to the console, sat down, and began the verification protocol himself. At 3 in the morning, Evelyn called Daniel Whitaker. He picked up on the second ring. She did not waste his time. She told him Sentinel was fully operational. She told him the demonstration team would have a complete verification report on his desk by 6. She told him the signing would proceed as scheduled. She did not tell him who had fixed the system. That part, she said she would explain in person. He was silent for almost 10 seconds. Then he said, "Then I will see you at 9, and ended the call. At a few minutes past 9 that morning in the main conference room on the 44th floor, Evelyn Hartwell signed the largest contract in the history of her company. The consortium representatives did not know what had happened in the building 7 hours earlier. They saw a system that performed exactly as promised, a CEO who answered every question without hesitation, and a head of engineering who stood at the back of the room with a quieter expression than usual. What they did not see, because Evelyn had asked him to stay out of view, was a man in a gray uniform sitting in a small office down the hall, drinking the cup of coffee she had brought him herself. She came back to the office just after 11. The signing was done. The consortium had left. The building was beginning to return to the rhythm of an ordinary Tuesday morning, as if the night before had never happened. She closed the office door behind her and sat down across from Liam. "I want to offer you a position," she said. "Director of Systems Integrity. You would report directly to me. You would have full access to Sentinel and full authority over the team that maintains it. The salary would be what the role pays at this company, which is significantly more than what you are making now." Liam set the coffee cup down on the desk between them. He looked at the cup for a long moment, then at her. "I appreciate the offer, Miss Hartwell. I do not think I can take it." "Why not?" "Because the version of me that ran rooms like that one is not the version of me I have been working very hard to become. I have responsibilities at home that matter more to me than a title. I cannot be the person who works until midnight every night and answers phone calls at 3 in the morning. Not anymore." Evelyn considered him for a moment. "Then tell me what you would accept. A maintenance role, something stable. Daytime hours with the option to come in after hours only when something is genuinely broken. A title is not important to me. A paycheck I can count on is." She did not argue. She did not try to talk him into more. She simply nodded. "Then we will create the role exactly the way you described it. Lead systems maintenance day shift on call only for critical events. I will have the paperwork sent to you this afternoon." "Thank you." She watched him pick up the coffee cup again and turn it slowly between his hands. "Mr. Carter, may I ask you something?" "Yes." "How many other people are there in this industry right now, doing work like the work you have been doing on the 38th floor? People with your background, people who were good at what they did and who fell out of the room because life happened to them." "More than you would think. Would you help me find them?" He looked up at her. For the first time that morning, the careful, measured expression on his face shifted into something close to a smile. It did not last long, but it was there. "Yes," he said. "I would." Evelyn stood up. She crossed to the window and looked out over the city the way she had on the night before when the building had been falling apart around her. The light coming in now was different. The day was beginning. Somewhere on the 38th floor, a cleaning cart was rolling down a corridor under different hands. Somewhere in the building, an engineer who had thought he knew everything was learning something he had not expected to learn. And in the small office behind her, a man who had spent 5 years making himself invisible was about to start being seen again. She did not turn around for a long time.